Welcome, Jet fans, to another episode of the Jets Life podcast. We're getting closer and closer to the regular season as the Jets are now coming into their third preseason game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This week they did have joint practices with the Buccaneers, and there was a few other developments that I'd like to get to. With the first major development um, being a result of the running back room, Dalvin Cook signs with the Jets at a base salary of $7 million, but that can earn incentives up to $8.6 million. This was a move that we've been watching for quite some time. He's been linked to the Jets for basically since the day he was released by the Vikings. Did have a visit, and I believe he was the last team that the Jets did visit. Um, you know, from the for everything you heard on that visit, it seemed like it was a move that was destined to happen at some point in time. And I didn't really kind of lose any sort of faith that it was going to happen. Kind of kept optimistic that this was eventually going to be the result, as he didn't have any other visits lined out after the Jets visit, and any other teams. Patriots I never really saw as a real valid option. I would think he'd want to, at this stage in his career, being 28 years old, you know, try and go to a team that gives him the best opportunity to win. Miami was another option for him, being his hometown. I thought that was a potential threat to eventually sign him. But after all said and done, he does join a running back room that has Michael Carter, Izzy Abanikanda, and now recently reactivated from the PUP list, Brees Hall. It almost came back to back days. I don't know. It kind of ironic that Brees Hall was activated basically the day after Dalvin Cook was able to sign with us. So interesting timetable there. And from what we've seen from Brees Hall in very limited action, I think yesterday was his first practice in 11 on 11 drills, and I mean he looked the part. He looked quick, was able to get in and out of cuts, um, and had a little dump off pass that Rodgers on a little slant route when he was lined up wide, and was able to turn it upfield for a big gain. Just big progress there. I don't really expect too much out of Brees Hall to start the year. I think a major point that we've been talking through on this whole Dalvin Cook scenario was, you would envision that Dalvin would be the primary back for the first few weeks of the season to give Brees Hall that additional time to kind of get up to speed. I think he will be a target, and he will be someone that is active weeks 1 through 4 and obviously and beyond. But I think that, this gives them the opportunity to maybe not give him a workload of 20, 25 touches, maybe more in that 10, you know, 10 to 15, 15 being like real max to start out the year. I think that's kind of the safe route to go with Brees because, these knee injuries, these ACL injuries, you never know what you're going to get when a player comes back. You could have Adrian Peterson's situation where the very next season he's, rushing for a near rushing title, and all-time leader in rushing yards, or you could have a situation like Saquon Barkley, who took a couple years before he started to get comfortable with his knee. But this gives the Jets that luxury and Brees Hall the luxury of not having to be, you know, the workhorse and wear out that knee even more than it needs to be. So, um, good signing by the Jets. I think it came in a little higher than a lot of us were thinking, but I thought it would be like a 5 to 7 year $5 to $7 million max. The Jets going with 7 million guaranteed, and then up to 8.6 million. So, um, a big thing here, maybe the Jets don't touch that $8.6 million threshold um, in a normal circumstance, but with Aaron Rodgers taking that pay cut early in the offseason, I think this gives them the flexibility to be able to, go out there and get that guy for that extra couple million, which isn't really Joe D's MO, but when you're in a win now situation and, Jets have to win this year, they have to kind of, take that next step for sure. Um, it's an all in type of move, and it's kind of what we're expecting for this team right now. Sticking with the offense, and I'll stick with the positives for now. Garrett Wilson and Aaron Rodgers continue to show that connection is going to be something special to watch this year. Um, we all know. I mean, it's been highly documented what Garrett Wilson was able to accomplish last year with multiple quarterbacks, and not great quarterback play, be it. But Aaron Rodgers comes in, and he's got that quick rapport with Garrett Wilson, which not saying I was overly alarmed with, but with Aaron Rodgers' struggles with young receivers last year and bringing in Alan Lazard, initially, like, you do have some you know, skepticism or what, will Garrett get those touches? But it's highly apparent that Aaron Rodgers has come in here and he's taken Garrett Wilson under his wing and is, you know, it, it was pretty apparent. There was some videos that circulated on Twitter yesterday or X yesterday. Just Garrett Wilson was lined up on the right side. Aaron Rodgers looked over to him to the right, just gave him like a quick head nod, and Garrett ran a slant route where the linebackers were. Looked like Mosley may have blitzed or gotten out of position at some point. Garrett got into that space and was able to get a big gain out of that. These are the things that it's early in the process, but to see this what we're about 3 weeks, almost 4 weeks into training camp to see that already these two are kind of clicking and having that unspoken communication, as Roger says, on these like pre-snap situations. It's going to go a long way. First off, for Garrett Wilson to earn Aaron Rodgers' trust, which I think he already has fully, um, and for Garrett Wilson to get an understanding of what Aaron Rodgers wants. Which, again, going back to the Lazard and Cobb situation, that's a big reason why they're here, is to bring all these young receivers and young playmakers up to speed with what Aaron Rodgers expects and what he wants out of his playmakers. So that's the positives of the Jets offense. Now I'm going to switch over to some of the negatives. The Jets offensive line continues to struggle. They have basically running out different formations or different combinations of offensive linemen. Part being Lake and Tomlinson, AVT were both missing some time this week. So you had Titman filling in for on the left guard side, which is a little shocking to me. I would have thought, based on what Titman has done in the preseason, I would have thought he got a little bit more of a share at right guard because should there be an issue with the offensive tackle spots where they might need to kick AVT out to the right tackle spot, you would think Titman would be the next guy to fill in at that right guard spot. But I guess Schweitzer is another option that the Jets are looking into. I mean, again, the Jets don't know who their top five is. I think they're just basically playing with all of the different options and seeing who kind of takes that next step or catches the coach's eyes. Um, but you know, is it concerning for sure? I mean, I think this was like probably one of the on offense side of the ball, definitely one of the more concerning spots on the roster, how this offensive line was going to gel, especially when you had the uncertainty at tackle positions with Makai's health concerns over the past couple of years. Dwayne Brown coming off, you know, rotator cuff injury from last year and coming off of surgery. He's still not activated, but from my understanding, those are a report that the Jets are basically hoping to have him active for next week in training camp. So you would think that once all these top guys kind of get lined up, things will start to fall into place the way the Jets want it to. But the biggest question mark overall, I think the Jets interior isn't going to be a major concern. We have Connor McGovern, and we know what he is. He's a middle of the pack average center, but he's a veteran and he plays. So that's a huge plus, especially for this offensive line. So he'll be playing, and then the guard spots. You have Lakin on the left side, AVT on the right side, and then those tackle spots with you would expect Brown to be on the left side. And just recently this week, the Jets have started to put Becton on the right side. This was basically like what a lot of us thought the offensive line would look like in a best case scenario, like top five type of situation. So with Becton potentially being our right tackle, I think that does give us the best five, with the exception of center. I think Tippmann eventually, ideally would take that spot somewhere in the middle of the season. But that would ideally be like your top unit, at least for right now, based on what the Jets have. So, it's concerning. Billy Hunter and Max Mitchell have both struggled in training camp. We saw major struggles from Max Mitchell in the Hall of Fame game. These were guys who kind of had a little bit of, hope. Well, at least Max Mitchell. I wasn't a huge fan of the Billy Hunter signing, but he's familiar with this offense, so I think that's a major reason why he's here. But Max Mitchell, I was, based on what we saw from him last year as a rookie, you thought you might have someone that could be a good third offensive tackle, could play a swing role on both sides, or that sixth offensive lineman at the goal line type of situation. But he struggled a little bit. I'd like to kind of see him take another step here this week in the preseason, see if he can kind of hold his own on the right side. Because I mean, at the end of it all, we saw with the Jets offensive line what happened with the Jets offensive line last year, injury after injury after injury. You can't really succeed any season when you have as many injuries as the Jets did on their offensive line last year. And if we're relying on backups in situations like that, Max Mitchell does need to kind of progress a little further. Um, so just concerns with the offense continue, but the rough one practice with Carolina, they did rebound in that preseason game, rushing for over 120 yards. I think that was a major point of emphasis for Saleh to make sure that this offensive line was kind of gaining a little bit of confidence as we move forward and get closer to the regular season. Okay, moving on to the defense, not much here that I really need to get into, but we're starting to see Quentin Williams really we saw what he did last year. He was a great defensive player, one of the best on our team, for sure. But you're starting to see this year that, I mean, at least it was presented in Hard Knocks. This guy has really taken on this role, and as I believe he's even better than he was last year, and that's saying a lot because he had 12 sacks last year, led the team there in a limited role, limited snap counts. But this is, we're seeing somebody who just got paid, and he's not shying down. He's you know a big reason why he wanted a contract with limited years that he can, after this contract expires, be in the market for another contract. So this guy's really looking to be great. And you know what better man to pay than Quinton Williams? The guy's so happy. He's always got a smile on his face. Um, Real vocal leader, which didn't really kind of see that initially in his first few years. I think that comes with confidence and his familiarity with this team. Um, Longest tenured Jet, I think, outside of Thomas Hennessy. So, and the only McCagnon pick that was able to survive through the Joe Douglas, basically cleaning house party that he had. Quinnen, there's really not much you can say about, if there was any player that deserved every bit of the contract he got, it's Quinnen Williams, and he's showing it week in and week out, to the point where the Jets defense is like been so dominant over the Jets offensive line that they've had to take him out to give the offense some time to kind of get into a rhythm at practices. Again, going to the concerns that we have on the offensive line, but Quinn's a big factor in there because we've seen what this guy does game in and game out. Teams have put three offensive linemen on in blocking situations to try and keep this guy from causing havoc, and he's every bit of a game changer as you want. I mean, I think that you can count on your hand, not even the number of players that are better or as impactful as he is from an interior defensive line standpoint. Um, so, like I said, you're seeing it on Hard Knocks. He just a different. He's different. He's got a motor that they showed that one scene where Ulbrich was basically telling him like you were perfect today. You made a big mistake by showing how great you can be in these practices because we're gonna expect that from you week in and week out. And I don't think that's a big issue for Quinnen because he's every bit the best, one of the best players on this team. I say one of the best because Sauce was all pro in his first year with us. You don't expect it to go up from there. But Quinnen Williams definitely takes that spot as one of the top two players on this defense, and I expect him to take a major step forward, even more so than he did last year. So as I mentioned earlier, we have our third game of the preseason coming up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And what do I expect from this game? A lot of the same from the previous week. I'm just expecting for Zach Wilson to keep that momentum going. Had a good first week. Last week, he ended that first half with a touchdown drive. Kept it very conservative, not a lot of passes, 10 yards downfield. Basically, he was playing game manager, and that's perfectly fine because, compared to what he was last year, game manager is a major step forward in the right direction. This week, I'd like to see him take that same approach, but maybe with a few shots downfield. I know he did have that big play in the first game, the Hall of Fame game, to Malik Taylor. You just want to see a little bit more of that happening throughout the week, throughout the game, taking shots when they're there. Um, I think that's really the next step in his progression. Is he's comfortable, he's making the accurate throws, but yeah, like I said, the next step is just being able to get that ball downfield, and make some plays in that aspect. Additionally, I think that we spoke about the running back room. I don't expect Brees to be playing. I don't expect Dalvin to be playing. So you just want to see this competition now for that third and fourth running back spot. I think Izzy Abanikanda is pretty much a shoe in at that point because he was just drafted and has shown a lot of promise in his first two preseason games. So you would think that fourth running back spot comes down to Michael Carter and Zonovan Knight. I think you know Zonovan had a great year last year. I think it's easier to kind of maybe stash him away on the practice squad. So I think that's going to be something the Jets will consider in their decision making. Michael Carter, I don't see a situation where he's stashed on the practice squad. Someone will likely pick him up because of how promising his rookie year was. He did have a down year last year, which he admits himself. But I think that you know the higher upside, in my opinion, goes to Michael Carter. But that means his work, the showings in the preseason, he has been very consistent in training camp too. So I wouldn't take it too lightly on that. But just want to see what happens with these running backs. I want to see, even though his roster spot is probably locked, I do want to see Izzy Abanikanda kind of continue to progress. He had a touchdown run in the first game, a near touchdown in the second game, and showed that elusiveness with a quick spin move and that big play potential. Just want to see him continue to progress and see if he can not only earn a roster spot, but earn a major role on this roster as we get through the regular season. As I mentioned earlier, I don't really think the Jets want a situation where Brees Hall's getting major carries to start the season. Just work him in slowly. Izzy Bonaconda having a good rest of his preseason training camp could definitely go a long way to the Jets building more confidence in slowly working Brees Hall into the workload. And then the third thing I do want to see this preseason game. Who's gonna be the fourth linebacker on this team? You saw the first game. Chaz Surratt was highly praised by Robert Saleh during that game. But in this last week, you saw Zaire Barnes, who a lot of us you know was basically like a name that not a lot of us were aware of going into the draft. Jets picked him up. And there wasn't even that much game film on him because it was such a limited sample size of what he is. But what we saw from him in that second preseason game versus Carolina is probably what led the Jets into wanting to pick him. He's so quick, able to diagnose plays pretty quickly, and was able to kind of support in the screen game a lot, which is a major issue that the Jets had going into from last season. And you saw it a little bit in the Browns game. Browns were attacking them with the screen game, so you just want to see that continued progression there. And again, who's going to take that fourth spot? My early favorite, again, similar to Izzy, I would think the Jets want to go with the guy that they drafted. Just recently in this draft, Zaire Barnes probably has that inside track, and the fact that he's already kind of showing that game speed, kind of acclimating to it pretty quickly, is going to be a major positive to this coaching staff. I would think. So again, just want to see this continued progress of these younger players, and then obviously the fourth and most important thing. I said it last week. I'm going to say it again, and I'll say it every week, including the regular season. Just want to see his team leave the preseason with a clean bill of health, no injuries. Um, just that's the biggest thing. The one thing that can really derail the season is a major injury to a big player, and I don't think that many of the major players are going to be playing in this preseason game. Um, but for any player to kind of go with injury, there's certain positions where the Jets are thin at. We've already, explained the offensive line. Linebacker is a position that we are a little thin at. So any injuries to those spots could really cause a problem down the road. Don't want to see it. It's not something that I'm interested in at all. So just want to see them leave this game with minimal injuries and as small of an injury report as possible as we get closer and closer to the regular season. So that's all. That's about it for what I have at this point. Just look forward to more content. I'll give an update on the Bucks game on Monday when I have my next recording. And if you haven't already, please like and subscribe to my channel. And let's go Jets.